Hello YouTubers, this is the Noobifier. Today I'm trying to get the word out about an interesting solution from ALPHACOOL. In the most general terms, CPU and GPUs operate on clocks and frequency. The higher those are, the more output they'll do, which is called an overclock or beyond standard. The higher you push, the more voltage you might need to preserve stability. This results in more heat. Everything's going to go fine until the tech gets too hot and starts to throttle. Throttling is when the tech sees that it's operating too warm and downclocks itself to return to normal. You can maintain your higher overclock if you never throttle, and this is why most people who plan to do overclocking address the cooling from an overkill perspective. This is where the ALPHACOOL might actually come in very handy. The 2080 Ti is the most up-to-date GPU, and its initial load testing showed it leveled out around 80 degrees Celsius. It runs all day and all night under load at 80 without issue. If you wanted it to run cooler, you could easily bump the fan curve, which will also increase the noise from the fans. Even with the fan set to a deafening 100%, you may never be able to achieve a very high overclock. Water's 5 times more capable than air at moving heat away from a component, and when done properly, this can keep things cooler without all the noise. ALPHACOOL was the first to make a hybrid cooling solution for the 2080 Ti. They made a solid aluminum VIN stack that'll passively cool into the case and then also address the GPU directly with a closed-loop pump plate and a 240mm radiator. This fully replaces the stock cooler. They also included a new backplate, which is how the contact is made. To begin with, we need to disassemble the card. You'll need a clean, well-lit place to work, micro drivers, Q-tips, alcohol pads, and paper towel. Steve over on Gamers Nexus did a very detailed teardown, which is linked in the description, but it's actually quite simple. Unscrew the backplate and remove it. Release the 4 tension screws and then release all the bolts that hold the cooler onto the front side. Once the cooler is disconnected from the card, release the ribbon cable and carefully clean up all the thermal pads and the thermal compound. The included instructions show you how to cut the included thermal pads. I used a razor blade, and this is my only main complaint. The pads were not pre-cut, but this is actually quite minor. With the newly cut pads on the VRM and memory, apply the thermal compound of your choice and carefully align the card onto the cooler. First, you're going to install 2 small bolts that'll help you keep everything in place for the next step. Cut and place the rest of the thermal pads on the back of the card according to the instructions, and then carefully place the backplate. Unlike the stock cooler, this cooler is held together with screws that pass through the backplate, through the PCB, and into the fin block. I loosely finger tightened all the screws and then snugged them in a pattern over and over until they were fully tight. Now you're ready to install by locating a suitable place for the radiator and fans, and then installing the card into a slot. The pump has a PWM connector that can plug directly into a CPU or pump header, and there's also a Y splitter for the fans. I'll close out with my impressions. The results of all of this effort is a system that operates a full 10 degrees cooler under the same load while being practically inaudible. I could likely pull the temperatures down even further if I was willing to add a little bit more noise. The pump is very quiet even set to 100, and the loop takes a significant period of time to level out. I think this has to do with a massive aluminum heat spreader and the Waterblock. Everything that gets hot is in contact with the heat spreader. And that's it. This video was not sponsored in any way. I was able to bring you this information because a friend offered his hardware for me to test. Thanks very much for spending your time with me. I love it when a company is passionate about quality and not into cutting corners. I was impressed by the ALPHACOOL hybrid design, and I think you'd be happy with it. Fly safe, and I'll see you in the verse.